and we are doing the thing. Good afternoon, my friend.
Hello, hello.
How are you today?
I feel good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel kind of a little inceptionized. Since
inceptionized.
we're a little bit earlier than usual, but this is gonna air in the future just because at the time you'll be at the games, so that's awesome.
Yeah. So we're recording this. If you're watching this, when you're watching this, this was recorded about a week before you're watching this.
Hmm.
This is actually the first podcast we've ever recorded preemptively,
True.
if I'm not mistaken. It would probably be beneficial of us to continue to do this.
True.
not not just when I'm going to be in Madison for a week coaching or one of us is going to be gone, but
How do you feel being in Madison for a week? Are you ready for the trip? First of all,
yeah, I am excited.
yeah.
A bunch of people have asked me if I'm nervous yet or like whatnot. I don't think I'm really that nervous. I think I'm just more excited
Hmm.
um, to
Just
go to
ready.
Madison and stuff like that. I am grateful that I'm gonna go and have a couple days in
Mhm.
Madison before like the big show starts. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
because yeah, you went last year, didn't you?
I went last year because I was helping the team a little bit, but I think I got there the day before it started.
Yeah, and it was all the time go basically.
Yeah, it was like I got there and everything started popping off
Right, and this
basically.
year it's going to be a lot more involved. So,
Yeah, I didn't have like a coach's pass or anything last year. I was more kind of support behind the scenes.
mhm.
But this year I'll be kind of in all the inner workings and things like that. So
Nice.
yeah,
That's right. Yeah,
excited. Team's ready. Kelly's ready. Everybody's pretty excited. So just got to get on the plane and go do the thing, right?
let's do it.
Yeah, man. All right. So we wanted to hop on here and discuss. So all of our Ascend athletes at the time we're recording this
Hmm.
are in a deload week. At least the vast majority of them. Even most of our one-on-one athletes are going through some sort of a deload week.
Hmm.
And we wanted to talk about our next cycle that is coming up, Mojave. So this cycle is kind of the last cycle of our off season. This cycle fills a couple different roles um, that set us up for success in our preseason. And there's some things that I wanted to talk about the preseason because I feel like athletes will have some questions about that when we get there. But before we talk about Mojave and the last offseason cycle and the preseason, all that stuff, I felt like it was important for us to jump on here and before we get into that, discuss zone 2 in CrossFit. So,
Yeah, let me ask you that. I've worked for you for however long. I don't remember how long so far, but you are a very big proponent of Zone Two.
yes.
You also, I've heard you defend Zone Two in multiple conversations,
Yes.
yeah, against various people. Um,
Yes.
in the past, at least the blog, our compete blog last cycle, you were up to about 3 pieces of Zone Two per week.
Mm-hmm.
What do you what do you love? Why do you love Zone Two so much?
Yeah. So the first kind of thing to set the framework for this is I am a big believer in when I structure out a year of programming, I take a very pseudo block periodization model to what I do. If anybody doesn't know what that is, go Google it. You're going to see a bunch of Russians and Russian information talking about how great block periodization is. Block periodization is not the only way to do things, but it is a fantastic way to segment the focal points of different training cycles in your training year. Okay. So I use a lot of zone 2, especially in the off season. And then I use a lot of zone 2, but not nearly as much as the off season during the in season in order to do a couple different things. They serve different purposes at different times. Okay.
Hmm.
From a physiological perspective, one of the biggest reasons I believe in zone 2 is, as everybody knows, zone 2 build your aerobic base. Build your aerobic base. What is that? What the fuck does that mean? Like everybody's like, "Oh, you're going to build your aerobic base." What are you doing in the body when you do that? Like we can talk about like, "Oh, my zone 2 pace went from X to Y
Mm-hmm.
and that's faster." And that's great because that's that tangible kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. When we do zone 2 training, we are increasing the mitochondrial density in our muscle fibers,
Okay.
right? The mitochondria are these little bitty things in your muscle fibers that help create energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, to put this in the simplest terms possible, if you've got more of them, you're going to be able to be fitter and produce more energy. It's also that zone and the mitochondria primarily use fat, right? We know anaerobic or aerobic and anaerobic glycolysis takes place outside the mitochondria,
Right.
right? So I'm making more mitochondria that are better at using fat, which means I don't have to use carbs as much. And we know, you and I know, and I don't care who says we don't know, we know this is science. You're a fucking PhD. If you are burning fat primarily for a fuel, you are operating at a lower threshold of work than somebody who's not.
Yeah.
Therefore, that work is going to be more sustainable or aerobic.
True.
Okay. So we do zone 2 to build that mitochondrial density in the off season to set you up to have a higher potential for output later. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It also is great for recovery. There's also a couple really cool things you can do with it. They're like CrossFitty that if you follow the Ascend programming we've been doing.
Right.
Okay. But that is the biggest reason zone 2 is used for me and my athletes, and I'm such a proponent of it in the off season. There's a
Mm-hmm.
couple different reasons we do it in the in season to accrue some extra work on the body. And this is one of the bigger points I'd like to make while we talk about this brief discussion about zone 2, because we could have a whole nother podcast on this and I could go really into the weeds.
Right.
But zone 2 by nature is not a potent stimulus to the body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a reason we've been doing zone 2 sessions 2 to 3 times a week for basically an hour each time. You can't do zone 2 once a week for 30 minutes and get anything out of it. Right?
Right.
So in the in season, it can serve as a function to get a little more work in that's not going to beat down your body too much. And we know we're getting in, for the stimulus it is, an aerobic conditioning stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you look at some of the best endurance athletes in the world, and I don't care what anybody tells you, you have to be able to endure and sustain to be good at CrossFit. If you look at some of the best endurance in the world, athletes in the world, cyclists, Tour de France guys, runners, 80 to 90% of all their training volume is zone 2. Obviously, we're not doing 80 to 90% of our training volume in zone 2 as CrossFitters,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a huge benefit to spending a lot of time training in that way. Okay. So the first point is because zone 2 is not an acute stimulus, you have to do it repeatedly to get the benefits.
Okay.
Right? Doing zone 2 is not going to magically make your mile faster. It's not going to magically make your 2K faster or your 5K faster in a couple sessions. Zone 2 is a low trajectory, long time horizon benefit of improvement. Right?
Okay. I have a couple questions for you. One is kind of just kind of a baseline for people to understand us more. Can you define what zone 2 is?
Sure. So zone 2, there's a couple different ways to figure it. Basically, I am not somebody who's adamantly against the 220 minus your heart rate. I think it's very easy for most athletes to use that formula and start working in a zone 2 pace. And also there's some ways to figure out if they're actually in their zone 2. So 220 minus your heart rate times 0.7. It's
You
about
saying
where your zone 2 is.
minus your age or minus your heart rate?
Minus your age, sorry.
Minus your age.
220 minus your age times 0.7. And then what I tell people is plus or minus 10 beats.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's more of a range of heart rate that you want to stay in while you're doing your work.
Correct. The
When, sorry, go ahead.
uh, so Dr. Peter Attia talks about this a lot, and he has had like a zone 2 specialist. I would say his name, but I would butcher it, so I'm not going to. It's like Inigo or something, and I'm not even going to attempt the last name.
Mm-hmm.
But the litmus test to know if you're in zone 2 is if I was doing zone 2 right now and you asked me a question, I could answer you in a full breath.
Mm-hmm.
But if we held a conversation, I would get annoyed.
So would you say, because a lot of people kind of stick to the watch or stick to the whatever is measuring their heart rate, and would you say you want their average output to be in zone 2?
Yes.
Not
Obviously,
like they can go up and down as long as their average output stays within zone 2.
so we want to be as cyclical as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
I want you to be as steady as possible in that range.
Right.
But if you get the majority of your time in that range, you're getting the majority of the zone 2 benefit.
And
Right?
then, yeah. And then my second question for that, especially with watches and technology right now, they typically have an estimation for you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if all the watches have the possibility of um, setting the zone yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Would you go with whatever the watch programs for you, or would you still go with the equation that you said
I tend to try to look at both.
and see
Uh,
how far they
dis-
are?
disclaimer: don't use watches; they suck. Go buy a chest strap from Polar for $90. Don't have Starbucks for 2 weeks straight and just go buy one if you're actually serious about getting fitter. Because the watches are drastically off from your actual heart rate. What
Uh,
I would say,
yeah.
so like my Garmin, I can put in my max heart rate
Yeah.
and then it'll adjust my zones. So that's one way to do it. But again, you have to know what your max heart rate is.
Right. So unless
If
you've
you
measured it.
if you don't know, I would start with the formula and then do a zone 2 session at that heart rate and see if you can talk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then go from there. Okay? So this is a good segue into the second point about zone 2 that I've heard various other coaches in this space discuss,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to make a point here. Zone 2 is not supposed to be fucking easy.
Okay.
If you are doing a proper zone 2 ride on a bike erg, you are sweating your ass off and working to stay in that zone. Like zone 2 is not rest. It's
Mm-hmm.
not zone 1, right?
Right.
There's even a little bit of research that has come out that I've seen from some people that I follow who are exercise scientists in sport. High zone 2 seems to be the real fucking sweet spot. Like zone 2 threshold,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which makes a lot of sense. You're getting the most stimulus while still in zone 2. So that's the highest zone 2 stimulus you can get before
Right.
your body starts to switch fuel substrates and do other processes to accrue the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I've seen a lot of athletes mess this up. I've seen a lot of coaches mess this up. Zone 2 is not easy. It is work.
Yeah.
It's just not that damaging on the system.
And it's also mainly because there's not a lot of impact.
Exactly. You
And then,
can go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, or based on your previous mentioning, you said zone 2 will not make you faster right away. It will not push your mile, push your 1K row or so.
It
Would you
over time it
would
will.
you argue that, like, when I'm thinking about zone 2, I don't think it makes you faster, period. It just makes your recovery better.
Correct. There's a lot of disagreement in the kind of scientific literature community on this. They're like, rest is rest, and so any stimulus is not rest, because like you're getting a lot of caloric expenditure in a zone 2 session, which you have to replenish from. Obviously, electrolyte loss, water. If you live in Houston, I do a zone 2 session, I look like I jumped in a pool.
Right.
So it's not true rest, but again, the stimulus isn't intense enough for most athletes to feel beat up or sore. So it is something that can be placed on an active recovery day or as a recovery session or an easy session if you're really beat up in the gym.
But
And
even the stimulus itself, like I don't like you still need to do speed work to get fast,
oh yeah. No, so
right?
that's something I want to clear up too.
Yeah.
There is a really popular coach in the space who has posted several times about you got to be careful when you do zone 2 because it'll make you slow. Because you're teaching your muscles to contract slower.
Hmm.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. One of the predominant thoughts is your muscles don't learn to your muscles contract at the rate in which your nervous system tells them to.
Hmm.
Right? Muscles don't just fucking do stuff. Not skeletal muscle anyways, right?
Yeah.
So that's scientifically not true. The
Does it
second,
develop higher levels of slow twitch fiber?
yes, that is correct. And here's the thing with zone 2 in CrossFit. It has to be appropriately dosed. And the other side of this is if we have athletes doing what, let's say 2.5 hours, maybe, of zone 2 work a week, maybe, which is in the zone 2 and endurance world, not a lot, right?
Right.
And then any other time they do a conditioning session, it's speed work, VO2 max work, power output work on the machines, anaerobic sprint intervals, AMRAPs and Metcons, where they're literally trying to go fast. You're not going to override all those stimuluses of how to move fast by biking at a zone 2 rate a couple times a week. That's
So
not
you're
going to
you're
happen.
exposing them to different stimuli, which is beneficial for them.
Exactly. The other thing for this that people may not realize unless they've coached some athletes who are kind of outliers on certain machines, but I'm going to use Jacob as an example. Jacob Marlowe, he does a lot of zone 2 work. He is a very strong and very powerful athlete. He needs to develop his aerobic system. We've actually stopped doing zone 2 work on the bike erg for him. One, because his quads are enormous and it's not that hard anymore. But when we were doing it, Jacob's zone 2 pace on the bike erg was like damper 4.5 or 5 at like a 148 with like 85 to 90 RPMs a minute. That's 90 contractions. That's 90 rotations a minute. That's not slow.
Yeah.
Like nothing about that is slow,
Right.
right? So I think keeping context in mind is important and looking at your training week, looking at your training plan and understanding the amount of inputs you're putting in one energy system and how the body's going to respond to that versus the amount of inputs you're putting in another energy system
Mhm.
and how the body and the muscles are going to respond to that.
So
But
you're also telling me by that part about Jacob is it still depends on the athlete.
100%.
If you have an athlete that is already full or higher capacity of low twitch fiber or better, very high endurance, then maybe at this point you don't need as much zone two,
Sure. Yeah.
right? You want to work on the other stuff more.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it all comes down to if the athlete needs to develop slow twitch fiber, which is not a bad thing.
No.
Because their name's slow doesn't mean that you're going to contract slower. You're just basically being,
They have less force production potential
and they fatigue
and
slower,
they fatigue slower. That's their job,
right?
right? I mean, the other side of this, not to go down another rabbit hole, but the rate at which you can move in a given modality at zone 2 depends on your fitness in that modality.
Hmm.
Like I can zone 2 row at a higher work output than I can zone 2 bike.
That's why most people can't zone two run.
Right. For most people, if they're going to do a zone 2 running session, they're going to like run
Walk.
for a minute, walk for a minute,
Yeah,
run for a minute, walk for a minute, which I would say if you're that athlete, go fucking do zone 2 running because
right.
your aerobic conditioning is terrible.
Yeah.
Right. But like the modality that you choose like it's going to impact what is zone 2 for you and how good at zone 2 you are at that. Like I said, for me, zone 2 biker is something I've been doing more, but it's difficult for me because I got little bitch quads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I've put tons of hours of rowing in my last 10 years of CrossFit almost, and I'm 6'2".
Right.
So like I can row, right? Like, yay. So
Yeah.
like,
Right.
but people have to understand, and like, it's okay to train all those modalities for zone 2.
Ideally, you want to be able to train all of them at the same um, intention, at the same capacity. That's if you have all the resources, of unlimited resources. But right now,
Right.
yeah, like you want to make sure that you're not lacking or having a gap, even if that comes to, I mean, let's be honest, they threw a marathon row at them. Whoever spent the least amount on the rower was probably the lowest outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing with that too is, what was the thought I was going to say? It popped in my head right like halfway through you were talking. Oh, when we're doing zone 2 work, and again, this is something that I don't feel like a lot of coaches give the context for when they discuss something like zone 2. Obviously, it's not sport specific. I'm not giving you zone 2
Soccer.
to inherently make you a better at an 8-minute fucking AMRAP.
Yeah.
I'm giving you zone 2 to make you a fitter organism in multiple different modalities so that we can layer work on top of that, which gives you the potential for a higher peak of your pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not mutually exclusive. Like they're connected, but they're also independent to a sense.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, just keep doing AMRAPs.
Fucking A, right? Like,
yeah,
just keep doing AMRAPs till you're blue in the face and see how that goes.
Yeah.
I think that's a good enough without us turning the whole podcast into zone 2. Kind of my thoughts, our thoughts on zone 2. If anybody wants to discuss zone 2 with me further, my Instagram handle is up there. Feel free to shoot me a message. Do zone 2. Don't be stupid. Do other high intensity interval work. Do other high intensity work. Refuel after you do zone 2 and vary your modalities and check your ego because you're probably terrible at zone 2. Most CrossFitters can. I have seen athletes, and I was this athlete when I started doing zone 2 years ago. I could sit at zone 3 more comfortably and longer than I could sit at zone 2 because I was always in zone 3 or 4 doing CrossFit.
Right.
So expect it to be weird, expect it to feel weird, expect to suck at it, and understand if you do it in a long enough time horizon, because it's not an acute stimulus to the body, you will reap a fuckload of benefit.
Sounds good.
Done. Zone 2 rant over. That's probably my first official rant on the podcast.
It went very well.
Thank you. I didn't cuss nearly as much as I have before.
Fair enough.
I get very irritated when people say stupid shit. Anyways.
All right. So Mojave. Talk to us about the name.
We're going with the desert theme. So if people have followed us for a year at this point, all of our preseason and in-season cycles are based off mountain ranges. There's actually a lot of thought that went into that in terms of like which one's biggest, which one's tallest. Anyways, whatever. I'm nerdy and annoying about all things like that. So for the off-season cycles, we went with deserts, kind of the inverse, right? Thought about canyons, but anyways, just it's a mountain upside down. It's not whatever. It's a mountain upside down with air, bro.
I just think it's a flat mountain.
I just went on a 20-minute rant about zone 2, and now everybody thinks I'm an idiot because I said a canyon's a mountain upside down. Anyways, so our first cycle was Sahara. Second cycle is Mojave. For those of you who might be listening to this international, that's a desert in the United States that gets very hot. Needless to say, it's really hot.
It's cold weather. It's a cold desert.
It's cold desert. I actually thought about that because that is the thing. There are
Interesting.
technically like deserts that are not actually that hot. They're just like barren.
Hmm.
But anyways, so this cycle is a 5-week intermediary cycle,
Okay.
not in terms of the skill level or anything like that, in terms of where it falls in our annual progression.
Okay.
So we wrapped up Sahara. We wrapped up Great Dividing Range. So Great Dividing Range was the first cycle that separated, hey, you made semis, hey, you didn't make semis, right? And then Sahara was that second off season for our compete athletes, people who made semis and did not make the games. They started their off season progression. There, if you did make semis, didn't make the games, I hope you have a one-on-one coach, and you should probably actually just be wrapping up the frameworks from our Great Dividing Range,
Mm-hmm.
not Sahara yet. But anyways, so this is an intermediary cycle. And what we're doing in this cycle is, from a traditional perspective, we would call this a realization block. So over the last 2 cycles, man, my camera being backwards
I think there's a way to mirror
fucks me up. I'm going to have to figure that out because
it. There's
I'm
a
a
way to mirror it.
mess. I'm a mess over here. Anyways, the last 2 cycles, we've put in a ton of work on our Olympic lifts, particularly the snatch,
Yeah.
right?
And snatched like 3 times a week.
Yeah, we're snatching like 3 or 4 times a week, basically for the last 16 weeks. This realization block is for you to realize the progress you've made in that lift, the snatch, and as well as the clean and jerk.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be building up to some heavy singles on Fridays in those lifts over the next 5 weeks, giving athletes opportunities to hit PRs on the days they feel good, maybe just try to incrementally go up week to week as well.
Okay.
That's a perfectly fine way to approach it. We're also bridging ourselves into our first preseason block, which will come after this, which will start September 5th, 4th. Math's hard, whatever. Somewhere in there, beginning of September. So we're kind of realizing the progress we've made in the snatch and the clean and jerk, wanting to get really
September 4th.
September 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So wanting to get really accurate numbers on where our snatch and clean and jerk is at, because that is the most often tested sport-specific lift in CrossFit,
Mm-hmm.
snatch and clean and jerk, or variations of, which guess what? If there's a snatch complex or a clean and jerk complex, whoever has the highest snatch and clean and jerk fucking wins.
We also been doing that.
Exactly. Because it helps you clean and jerk and snatch, but like
Right.
the road goes both ways with those. Anyways. And then all of our other lifting is setting us up to go into that off season, that first preseason block of lifting, which will be an 8-week cycle. Okay.
Okay.
On the conditioning side of the house, not much is changing. We're still doing a lot of zone 2. We're doing a lot of anaerobic work on the machines. Some mixed modal anaerobic work, because everybody knows that has a different flavor to it, right? Mm-hmm. And some traditional CrossFit Metcons per week, lots of accessory bodybuilding, lots of accessory gymnastics. No, I'm not going to stop programming L-sits until everybody can hold a 3-minute L-sit. I don't care. It's coming. Don't know when, but when it does, you'll be ready for it.
Fair enough.
So this block is a new block for our weightlifting, but very much a continuation and a kind of polish off on the off-season conditioning work that we've been doing. Some athletes since the beginning of April, basically.
Yeah.
And then kind of everybody at least since around June. Right. A couple important things with this cycle. We're not programming a lot of CrossFit Metcons right now. That's okay. When you do CrossFit Metcons, for everybody who listens to this, whether you're following one of our blogs, whether, and I'm sure all of our one-on-one athletes or one-on-one coaches talk about this with their athletes, you should have a little bit of an intention in every Metcon you do.
Right.
Learn something.
Set a goal for yourself.
Set a goal and learn something.
Or have your coach set a goal for you.
Exactly. And make it a conversation with your coach.
And it doesn't have to be a score.
No. I
or no?
don't give a shit how fast anybody goes in a Metcon until like January. Like, unless you have qualifiers coming up, because then, like, okay, whatever. But I want people to learn right now. And you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet,
Mm-hmm. You have to make
right?
mistakes.
You have to make mistakes. And guess what? You're still going to get fitter. So it's
Mm-hmm.
literally a win win. Take risks, plan sets differently, push your transitions, have fun with it and play with it. Move your bar down the gym if there's nobody in the gym. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
do different things and just learn, like, oh, when I did this workout with 5 muscle ups, I probably should have waited 3 more seconds before I
Right.
got on the rings because 2 rounds in, I was up shit creek without a paddle and everything went sideways.
Right.
Right?
Or, oh, I felt really good at 3 reps and 2 reps. Maybe next time I should try 4 and 1 or 5.
Exactly. And this is a theme that I really want to start instilling in people now because you're going to listen to me beat that to death all preseason. For those of people who have been following us for a full year at this point, we talked about it in our preseason podcast last year. We're going to talk about it when we preview the preseason this year. The higher your ability to understand workouts and intelligence at playing the game of CrossFit, when you are a fitter version of yourself come quarterfinals in the open and semifinals, you will be a way better athlete.
True.
Right? Things not to do this cycle. If it's Friday and we have heavy single snatch, heavy single clean and jerk,
Yep.
and you feel like shit,
Preach
just chill and hit a heavy single
for the day.
for the day. Maybe that's what we should have spent the first 20 minutes on, was explaining to people the difference between a heavy single
Or
and a
don't
1RM.
stop until you hit a wonder max.
Yeah, if you PR on a heavy single day, you should have no misses and everything should basically feel fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
We are not forcing any PRs right now.
Because
We
guess
have,
what? Like, let's say you don't PR at all this cycle, you should become very comfortable towards your 90%.
I was literally going to say that. If you go in and you don't hit a single PR on your snatch and clean and jerk in this cycle, but you hit 90% or higher every single week, hold on to your ass. Because by the end of October, you're going to hit like a 25-pound PR.
Yeah. That already, like, just being able to hit your 90% every single week is a massive win.
Yeah, and I mean there's a whole conversation we could have about the importance of raising your baseline in the sport of CrossFit, because basically in the sport of CrossFit, you're as good as what you can do on your worst day.
Right.
Like, this is a binary data-driven sport. Like, nobody's going to like Odell Beckham catch over the head and like have a crazy standout performance. So if you can raise what you can do on any given day, your maxes have raised.
Yep.
You just haven't had the day yet to do it.
Or the stars align.
Yeah, it's one. Yeah, that's something I don't think athletes discuss enough and like understand enough. Is like, anytime you PR, you're doing something you've never done before. Like, that's kind of hard,
I'm telling you,
right?
it's 10 years in right now or more. I'm still learning. Every time I snatch, I see it. I was like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Or why am I not able to do this? Right? Like, there's always a lesson in there.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I clean and jerk, like, even when you were coaching the class I was in yesterday, I literally told, I don't know if you heard me, I was like, those are the 3 best power cleans I've ever done.
I did not hear that, but that's good.
But yeah, you just feel like you learn something different every time you lift, and that's what intention is about.
Absolutely.
Don't go in and out without something learned about yourself.
I would rather an athlete hit 90 to 95% and it looked fantastic and they moved with intention for the next 5 weeks than
hit a
try
point.
and try and fail to hit a 5-pound PR 5 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
100%.
Mhm.
Right. Anything else on Mojave that you think jumps to mind?
No. I know again that it will probably the end of it, or at least the last week or two, will coincide with two of our big competitions coming up in Texas, or Texas area, I guess, including Wad Gods,
BCS
August
Classic.
26th, I want to say, and BCS
Yeah.
same weekend. So for the athletes who are doing that, you might have a little deviation towards the end of it, potentially, towards especially the like Metcon part. But
Yeah.
other than that,
I mean, if
it's
you're one of my athletes that's doing Wad Gods or BCS or any competition at the end of August, we've already started doing some
exactly
extra Metconning.
right. And there's some swimming involved, and for people doing Wad God specifically. So yeah, just expect that you might not be on the exact track of what we just talked about.
Yes. Also, if you're an athlete who's looking at doing the Wadapalooza qualifiers, which are like the first week of the next cycle, I would shoot one of our coaches an Instagram message so that they could assist you with a little bit of extra high intensity work.
Yeah.
You don't really need to worry about doing anything different with your lifting because you're going to be potentiated for the snatch and clean and jerk, which is fucking important. So, but yeah, those are two things that are kind of coming up that athletes should be aware of. Let's see. We have, oh, I hit a button and now it did a thing. Hold on. I don't know what to do, Mahmoud. Okay, I fixed it. Yeah, I'm the guy behind the controls, everybody, and sometimes I hit buttons and don't know what is about to
I was
happen.
gonna say nothing happened to my end, so I don't know.
It just popped up on my end, and I was like, "Oh God." Preseason cycle starts in September. Just a quick little note on this: we have a much longer preseason than most programs. There is some specific reasoning for that. I'm not going to go into that on this podcast. That is something we will discuss in our preseason preview podcast that we will record and put out before that cycle begins. But when you hear me say preseason and you're like, bro, it's September, I know it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Housekeeping. What? Obviously, we talked about the CrossFit Games next week. So, like,
Right. Again,
Kelly and the team are going to go crush.
if you guys are not aware of who is competing on the SN, on behalf of SN, we have Kelly Baker, individual female, and Team Einhorn or CrossFit Einhorn Ascend.
I was getting my shirt in there.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
And then anybody else? Am I forgetting anybody?
I don't think so. No. Camp.
Yes.
September 15th, 16th, 17th.
Yes.
You guys have to understand, I'm terrible with dates. So that's why I get really excited anytime I get a date right. The fact that I guessed the 4th for the next cycle to start, that might be my crowning achievement for the month. Ascend Athlete Camp in Houston, September 15th, 16th, and 17th. Preseason focus camp. Highly encourage you to come join. It's going to be a lot of fun. The weather should be cooled off a little bit in Texas by then. If not, then you won't die. We'll just laugh at you because we've been here since like May.
I'll be wearing pants anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, Mahmoud's gonna wear sweats because he's actually a sociopath undercover. He just doesn't admit it yet. This man wears sweats when it's 105 in the gym all the time.
Secret adaptation for
I don't want to wear socks anymore. Like I haven't worn my shoes to the gym in like a month.
Yeah.
I put on socks and shoes when I work out and immediately take them off if I'm not coaching.
I am aware of. I see that every day.
And he's in sweats.
Yeah. It's not that bad.
No, you're crazy.
Hey, comes the winter, it will be reversed. I'll be in a blanket and you'll be in a shirt.
I was gonna say that is fair. Every winter, like I'm walking around in a hoodie and Mahmoud's in like a
7 layer.
4-layer deep Arctic parka, acting like he's dying. So that's fair.
So yeah, it's just everybody has their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. We'll put the link for the camp in the show notes below. We'll put the link for to sign up for any of the Ascend programs and to have a consultation with a one-on-one coach. If you are somebody who does have big goals for 2024, the CrossFit season, or someone who is just looking for some guidance in their training and doesn't want to be out there flying alone, I would highly recommend filling out that one-on-one application form and getting in touch with one of our coaches. Having that guidance and having somebody to kind of check you and help light the path for you as you go down it can be really invaluable to help you reach your goals. So a lot of times athletes think they're on the right track, but they're really just kind of not seeing the forest for the trees. And a coach can really, really help out with that. So
agreed.
Did I miss any housekeeping? Oh my gosh, this is whoo!
Did a great job.
I'm gonna call it a day after that. I'm not gonna work or anything. I'm just gonna go chill. Yeah, I'm gonna go to bed, end the day on a high note. Not really. Courtney's gonna make me go swim with her because she's doing quad-cots.
Oh yeah, good luck.
So, all right. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We will catch you next time, and
we'll be after the games.
Yep, it'll be after the games. So hope you all are watching and cheering on our athletes. And yeah, man, I will talk to you from Madison.
Yes, sir.
When this is airing, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Again, Inception.
All right. I'll talk to you later, buddy.
Yes, sir.
Bye.